Hello chaps and chapesses. This week we're going to talk about how to catch permit on a fly. Well, why do we love these fork-tailed devils? They've been known and have always been known to be one of the most difficult fish to catch on the fly, and it's the challenge. I mean, they're super challenged, they're amazingly pretty fish. Very rarely do they ever give themselves up easily. For any saltwater fisherman, it's one of the pinnacles is to really be able to catch one of these fish and land them on the fly. How do we go about it? Really, I'm just going to give a quick run through. Tackle, tactics, where to fish, how to fish, just to give you guys a basic understanding of how I fish for them and what to do if you're in the situation where you see one. Start with tackle setups. I mean, there's several species of permits you can catch. The tackle does slightly depend on the type of species you're catching. Fishing for Indo Pacific permit, they're a little smaller and they tend to generally hold in shallower water. My setup is generally 9-foot rod, 9 weight, floating line and a 12-foot leader, normally to tippet of about 15 pounds. The same setup can also be used for Atlantic permit if you're fishing areas like Mexico, Cuba, Belize, especially for those fish in shallower water. But a lot of the Atlantic permit are a little bigger, and often you're fishing for them in deeper water, which is why much of the time people do prefer to use a 10 weight. Again, I would still look at using a 12-foot leader, normally fluorocarbon, again to a tippet of 15 pounds. That allows for a few fly changes. Let's talk about flies. Again, this is specific to the area you're going to be fishing. My personal preference, especially for Indo Pacific permit, in the Seychelles, it's really hard to look past a flexo crab. I've caught most of my and guided most of my permit in the Seychelles on flexo crabs. You can use obviously a wide range of things, but it's what I've got confidence in, and it just works. I tend to match the colour of a flexo to the bottom I'm fishing. If I'm fishing light sandy areas, really using tans, whites, turtle grass, maybe tan, brown, sometimes even olive can work. Sizes, most of the time I'll stick to tie on good hooks, Gamakatsu SL12s, and most of the time size 2s. Sometimes, especially if you're fishing shallow water, lighter flies, even down to size 6, can also work very well. Fishing for Atlantic permit, again, it's completely down to where you're fishing. My preference has generally been stuff like ragheads, pato crabs, which is again almost a variation on a raghead, avalons, squimps. It's useful to have a range of different flies to cover a range of depths, situations, and again you're trying to match the colour of the bottom where you're fishing. It's similar sizes, I mean maybe a little bigger looking size 2, size 4. Yeah, those would again be my general. Sometimes you can go even a little big, but again it's useful to have a range of flies, because with permit you do often get a lot of refusals, so it's nice to be able to just switch. Don't go out with a couple of flies. A lot of my flies, especially for Atlantics, do tend to be, rather than being exceptionally realistic, tend to be more a generalist pattern that's able to cover lots of bases, plenty of movement. I like flies with rubber legs, which is again why stuff like Pato's crab and ragheads work so well. Possibly shrimps, squimps, stuff like that are easier to fish. They can allow for a more forgiving retrieve. It all can work well. It's really, a lot of it's down to what you have confidence in, and a lot of it's down to good presentation, good stripping, and making sure the fly that you've got on is fished well. That really leads into next, talk about tides. It's so specific to the area. Permit really do seem to be a creature of habit, and you'll get the same fish coming into the same area again and again. To give an example, I mean, on Astove, generally spring tides fill the lagoon. Permit fishing is great. Go 18 miles towards Cosmolido, and neap tides seem to be far better for permit. The best permit fishing there can be had when there's very little water movement. So it's really the case of your guides will be clued up to where the fish are, where their movements have been. It's just a case of really listening to the guides and making sure you absorb any information that they're able to give you. So we've got all of our kit together, flies on, we're ready to go. What are we looking for? Well, hopefully our guides, he's taken us to the place. Yeah, how do we see permit, and what are we looking for? I'd say Atlantic permit do seem to be easier to spot. Their backs are much darker. In deep water, often you just see a black line. They'll swim in all heights of water, so you're looking for any fish with a black back. And they do have a very serpentine action. They move their whole body when they're swimming. In the shallows, they've got such a distinctive tail, and it looks like a knife sticking up. Indo Pacific are a little harder to spot. Their backs, rather than being black, tend to be more very dark brown. So you're looking for anything silvery, dark browny golden colour, again looking for the knife-like tail sticking up when they're tailing. And that serpentine swimming action, that again is very similar. Permit, you can see them in any kind of environment, especially Atlantic permit. You can see on turtle grass, white sand flats, and also deeper water. And often those fish in deeper water do tend to feed a little more easily than the fish in the shallows. And you can see some very big fish in slightly deeper water. Indo Pacific permit, less regularly do you see them in deeper water. Most of the fish you're targeting tend to be between, they can be as shallow as shin height, or could be as deep as thigh height. Rarely would you fish for them in deeper water than that. And again, you can see them on a range of beds, white sand flats, or turtle grass. It really does vary. But the main thing is that, as I said before, absorb what your guide's telling you. He should take you to the spots where he knows the fish will be. Almost like GT fishing, permit also do have a tendency of holding on top of rays. So whenever you're seeing any type of mud or any rays, just always be very wary, because fish will often hold on top, and a lot of the time they'll circle the ray looking for food that the ray's kicked up. So always just be very wary. If you see rays, double check. Once you've double checked, even if you don't see anything, it's worth a cast. Put a cast out and just be sure. Along with rays, one of the things that it is more difficult to spot, but you often see, especially if smaller fish are schooled up, is nervous water. And often permit will swim in all depths of the water column, and you can very often see schools of 15, 20, even more fish cruising high in the water column and cruising together, and you'll see that nervous water. It's something really you've got to be aware of. Sometimes you'll just see the flash as a fish turns and its body catches the sun. Leading on from that, so you've seen the fish, what to do then? How do you approach? How do you get that cast in? I'd say it's really, and this is one of the most important aspects of permit fishing. They are a very shy, wary fish. So the approach is key. You've got to, if you can, move slowly, move carefully, and move quietly. Really make sure that you're able to get yourself in a good position so you don't have to bomb out a huge cast. Make sure you can put a nice accurate cast in. The first shot really does count with permit. On skiff or on foot, just make sure everything's ready. You never know when your opportunity will come, so make sure the line's ready and make sure you're ready to go. Make sure your fly has not caught anything. On boat, I mean, really again, just make sure you've got a good idea of exactly where the fish are and what they're doing before you make the cast. It really pays to be patient with permit. Like I say, make the first shot count. If the fish are unsettled and they're going away from you, if you're able, follow them. That's either the skiff will try and follow them, or you can follow them on foot. Wait till they're presented nicely to you before you make the cast. If you don't have an option, you've just got to make the shot. But generally speaking, a fish that's going away from you, if you strip the fly towards him, he's not going to take. Really, what you're aiming for is for fish to be either to the side of you or coming towards you. The fish don't like an attacking fly stripped towards them. Both with Indo Pacific and Atlantic permits, obviously the cast is extremely important. I do think you approach each fish slightly differently. Indo Pacific permit tend to hold their line better than Atlantic permit. This means that you can really give them a little bit more lead. If I see a Indo perm, I do tend to give him a bit more lead than Atlantics, so I'd be looking to cast in the region of about 10 foot in front of the fish, especially if I see that he's holding his line. If he's zigzagging and changing direction a lot, I might reduce that to 6 foot. With Atlantic permit, they don't hold their line as much and they do move around a lot more. So I'd be looking to cast 5 to 6 foot in front of where the fish is going. The key is really to make sure the fish sees the fly. It's a fine line between you want to get as close as you can to the fish so he sees it whilst not spooking it. I like to wait until the fish is roughly about 3 foot in front of my fly, and then I'll give one long strip, and that's to get his attention. As soon as he's on the fly and he's close to the fly, just continuously stripping, keeping contact with the line the whole time, stripping a little shorter than that initial long strip. It can be very difficult to register when permit actually take the fly. Even a big fish, they've got an amazing ability to suck the fly in and spit it out, and you haven't felt anything. That's the reason why I like to keep the strip really continuous, so that if he does take at any point, there's a good chance I'll still be able to feel something. And it is really important that if he's on your fly, it does not matter how small or subtle that take or little nudges, that means the fly is in his mouth and you need to strip set. Bear in mind you're not using a 100 pound, 130 pound leader like you might be for GTs. A nice sharp strip set, and then after you've done that, raise the rod. Often if you strip set and just hold, he's going to break the line, especially he could be a 30 pound fish and you're using 15 pound leader. Your next job, you've set the hook. Hopefully the first thing he will do is go into the distance. Don't worry about the fish. You need to look at your hands and clear your line. Make sure nothing's wrapped around your feet. Keep your hands spaced as you clear the line onto the reel. And when he's on the reel, just be patient. It really doesn't matter if it takes half an hour or more to land the fish. Be patient. It's always, you've got to be slightly wary. You're using quite light leader for potentially quite a big fish. I like to keep the rod quite high, especially if there's any coral or any structure around. Obviously the same as any fish. Keep a good bend in the rod the whole time and keep contact, but wouldn't like the drag set too tightly, so a bonefish drag is perfect. If he peels off line and peels off backing, absolutely fine, let him do it, but don't suddenly start cranking down the drag or palming the reel too hard. Just be patient. You've hooked the permit, it's coming to the end of the fight, time to land the fish. Obviously this is a lot easier if you've got the guide. Two people generally always makes landing the fish easier, especially if a guide has a net. Fishing and landing fish by yourself, I don't like using a net. For me it's another thing to get caught around the line. I just don't like carrying one when I'm fishing myself. When it does come to landing a permit yourself, what I tend to do is I will obviously play the fish out. When it comes to landing him and he's coming close, rather than have all of the line reeled all the way in, I will hold a loop of slack, and then as I'm going to tail him, if he decides to kick, I can let the slack line slip through my fingers and he can go away again. Just be patient, it takes a couple of attempts. More often than not, you're not going to land him on the first attempt. Hold that loop of slack. As he's coming in, obviously just do your best to tail him, but if he wants to kick, let him go, that's important. They've got a powerful kick, they often look like they're done, and they'll often run back into the backing again. When I've been guiding, I've seen all manner of, obviously some great permit landed, and a couple of cock-ups. Season before last, hooked a really nice fish. The guy felt the drag was maybe a little bit soft on the reel, went to change the drag, and as he did so, the fish swam towards him. Quickly, he was too busy fiddling with the drag, and the line turns into spaghetti, and obviously the fish spat the hook. Many times I've certainly seen people fish take saws into the distance, peeling off backing, and the palm of a hand comes straight onto the rim of the reel. Lots of pressure, line snaps straight away. It's very easily done, but it just really pays. That's why you've got to be patient. So just to summarize what I've said already, a few things to remember. Tackle, either a 9-foot 9 weight or 9-foot 10 weight. Floating line, I like 12-foot leader, fluorocarbon. In some cases mono is good, but fluorocarbon. A range of flies, Indo Pacific. My preference is flexo crabs, tan, white or olive. Atlantic permit, again a wider range of flies, squimps, pato crabs, ragheads, avalons, in a range of sizes, 2, 4, sometimes 6, but generally 2, 4 should be perfect. And as I've said lots of times already, just trust your guide. He's the guy with the local knowledge. Listen to what he says and just absorb anything he says. It's really important, especially with fishing for something like permit. Casting to permit, my preference is a fish, an Indo Pacific permit, holding a straight line, 10 foot of lead. If he's changing direction a lot, zigzagging, 5 to 6 foot of lead. Atlantic permit, 5 to 6 foot of lead, make sure he sees the fly. With regards to approach, just be patient, be slow, and playing them, again, be patient, let them run. As always, thank you for watching, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.